From modest beginnings on my tiny airborne raft to burning through the skies in my own aerial mega yacht, this is Echoes of Elysium, a game where you'll explore vast and unique biomes, battle mechanized foes on land and in the sky, and most importantly, grow your completely customizable airship to take you on this journey. I partnered with Echoes of Elysium to release this video for the original launch date in December, but after playing the game, I told them it just wasn't ready, and thankfully, they listened. Throughout this video, you'll see some of the reasons I gave such honest feedback, but they have committed to refining this roughness ahead of its new early access launch date of January 27th. If you like what you see, make sure you wishlist it today on Steam. And enough of all that, let's dive in. First, I obviously name my world Snazzy Baby and set the player count to 3 because I like to pretend I have friends to play with and dove right in. You start the game aboard the tiny raft Daedalus, at least tiny for now, and Lethe, my guide for the game, instructed me how to improve my ship and seek out an island with a lighthouse for refuge before the plutocratic fleet could capture me. Naturally, I set out to begin gathering resources to improve my ship. You do start the game with a glider that both permits you to lift into the air, but also glide and dive as needed, but does come with a stamina bar, so it's not unlimited. The island near me had a few of the bare essentials to get me started, like scrap, fiber, cloth, and like any good adventure game, a tree to whack for wood. Also around me were tons of floating debris, remnants of the Elysium that once was. By using my glider to float through the air, I collected many of the same resources that I found on land, but one stood out. Lithium, not to be confused with lithium, which as it turns out would be the most important resource in the game. I spent some time zipping around my starting rock, grabbing as much debris as I could before heading back to my raft to build. With limited real estate, I started by expanding the floor space. Each build piece required wood, but also lithium to craft. Next, I set my workbench, which I hoped would get me more recipes, and of course, it had to be covered. And naturally, I was fresh out of wood. Always more wood. I zipped around a little more and I was really starting to get a hang of the glider, which wasn't terribly intuitive at first, but felt good as I figured out the controls. With my bench built, I inspected my new recipes and built one of everything before I discovered the winch, which, based on its description, seemed that it would ease the gathering of resources. While placing it, I did notice a menu appeared on my right, basically giving me my ship's stats. Integrity, which is basically its health, max weight, max speed, and acceleration, which for the most part were all 0, and my weight far exceeded the allowable limit. I didn't understand right now, but would shortly. For now, the winch allowed me to gather resources much more quickly, launching our harpoon towards the floating debris, increasing my range, and allowing me to rest safely on my ship. These do require ammunition, as you can see in the bottom right, but they last quite a long time, and you do get one automatically when crafting the winch. After what felt like a gazillion harpoon shots, it was time to get a move on, so I inspected the movement tab in my build menu and hovered over the sail, which based on all the green numbers, I figured it had to help and placed it down. It was time to seek out the lighthouse. Sailing? Flying? I don't know what to call it. Either way, navigation was seamless with a simple accelerator and responsive ascension and descension that I'd certainly need, as I later found out. I inspected my map and set a course for the nearby headlands with a max speed of 15 and still under my max weight of 300, which can be vastly improved as I later expanded my ship. If you're comfortable, like I was, you can take your hands off the wheel and do some work around your ship while you sail. For me, it made for a good time to see if I could snag some extra materials with the winch. But be careful for mines, which immediately came into my view a short moment later. Fortunately, the winch makes for a modest weapon to clear mines as well. I put down some storage as my inventory was getting full and got back to sailing. As I approached my first island, I figured a weapon would be wise, as I had no idea what to expect on foreign ground. The first thing I found were larger trees that I could not damage, so I assumed tool recipes would come available to me sometime down the road. Then, all of a sudden, the music turned hostile and some goats rolled up, as if to attack, but they just stood there. I did the only thing I knew how, and claimed them for meat and hide. Up the hill, however, was something less friendly. The crawler are crab-like creatures that explode, I learned after taking a couple hits, but for the most part weren't too hard to deal with. Ahead, the island contained what appeared to be the remains of what was once a temple, and had some chests to loot and crumbled corpses to search, but nothing too far out of the ordinary. Just as I was about to grab some veggies, the music turned again and a new enemy approached, a construct of the damaged variety. Very different from the crawlers and almost looked Spartan-like. However, like the crawler, were not tough to deal with. As I returned to my ship, I found it had been under attack while I was gone by buzzards. I manned the winch and took them down, but it desperately needed repairs. To make them, I first needed a repair kit, which effectively works as a tool but does have durability. With it equipped, you can enter the repair mode, a subcategory of the build menu, and repair what was broken. Following that, I decided to expand my ship to a greater size and added a second tier and winch on the opposite side for greater protection. But it wasn't enough, as an incoming buzzard sniped me out of nowhere. Or in hindsight, I may have shot myself with my own winch. Hard to say. Either way, this wasn't a big deal, as with death, you respawn at your ship and your inventory is maintained for retrieval. At this point, I had to refocus and set my sights back on the lighthouse, but with the increased size of my ship, weight was becoming a problem. To solve it, I was able to add both a port and starboard sail to supplement the central to increase both my weight capacity and ship speed. I set a course north and was on my way. Shortly after, I saw what appeared to be a sunken ship. I don't know what terminology to use with all these ships in the air. And it was an ancient ship from the Great War that preceded me, as Lethe informed me. Inside were some chests to loot, but also a construct that rocked me, although I thought unfairly. And I gotta be honest here, the combat in this game is kinda rough. Movements are delayed and unpredictable, hitboxes are all over the place, enemies disappear, teleport, it's all over the map as you see here and we'll see many times throughout the video. If I can ask anything from the dev team, it would be to improve the combat. Shortly after though, I found the island with the lighthouse known as the Port of Boreas, which was occupied by something? Port of Boreas occupied by something, I guess. After discovering a few new veggies, I made my way to the peak where it was both surrounded by mines and inhabited by the most difficult opponent yet. Yeah, the Dry Dock Guardian. But anyways, with him defeated, I unlocked the Dockyard, which from now on was going to be critical as I plotted my adventure forward in hunting Mechanos, the villain responsible for destroying my ship. The Dockyard contained 4 key pieces of equipment. Aether Loom, which I learned later is required to craft some more advanced recipes. The Aether Scope, which permitted researching resources I had found for a currency called Knowledge, which I would later spend at the invention desk for more advanced things to craft. An Arrow Can, which is simply a big storage container. And finally, a grinder, which as you can expect, would assist grinding bigger things into smaller ingredients. The problem was, each of these machines required fuel, and I still hadn't figured out how to get it. Before that though, I docked my ship at the yard, which went about as well as you can expect. Oh good. That's perfect. You seriously need to be careful of these mines. The good news is that most resources lost from parts of your ship being destroyed are retained for an easy rebuild. Next, I found the recipe for the lithium condenser, which was required to make the fuel needed to power the Dockyard's machines. Simply by combining lithium and crude plates at this device, condensing of the power source began. While that was processing, I placed the invention desk, which gave me all kinds of new things to strive for, but first we would need a whole lot of knowledge to unlock them. At the Aether Scope, each resource gave different amounts of knowledge, with 200 being the most, so I first researched a hinge. With my newfound knowledge, I returned to the invention desk and unlocked both advanced parts and basic tools, granting me my first axe and pickaxe, which I fortunately had the materials to craft. I decided to give my axe a try and took down a nearby tree and sent logs everywhere. But this did introduce me to a new game concept. Larger resources like this log and later ones like the rock and metal ores can only be carried one at a time and require special storage containers on our ship. The Arrow Can specifically at the Dockyard can host only these larger materials. And as I mentioned earlier, these are the materials that can be ground down in the grinder, like these logs, into wood. But at this point I hit a wall. I needed more lithium to research additional recipes and it was time to explore once more. I set forth north until I came across another island, again in the Headlands biome. This time, however, I found a lithium deposit. To my delight, with my pickaxe, I was able to mine it for a lithium chunk that could be carried like the log previously. While searching for more, I was jumped by a construct and a howler. After some careful dodging and strategic attacks, the dog dropped another heavy resource, but one I'd never seen before in the shock absorber. But I had to return the lithium chunk to my ship first before I could carry it. The shock absorber, as it turns out, saved the day, as when I picked it up, I unlocked the crude pallet recipe, the critical building structure I needed to store larger materials like lithium chunks on my ship. With the pallet built, I spent the next solid hour finding and mining lithium chunks and returned them to my shuttle with the plan of bringing it all back home to do all kinds of research. This felt like a bit of a drag of an experience while solo, but considering you can play Echoes of Elysium with up to 6 players, teamwork could ease the burden. While intending to return to the Port of Boreas to grind the lithium and make more fuel, I stumbled across another dockyard. On my playthrough, I encountered 2 of these, but there could be more across the map. That said, this one was far less hospitable than the first. I couldn't clear it of enemies, and for whatever reason, this one didn't offer to let me dock like the first one I found. That aside, I was able to find even more lithium chunks to mine here and started grinding them into lithium at the grinder. From there, I fed the condenser more crude plates and the refined lithium for fuel and started researching all that I could at the Aether scope. In a short time, I had accumulated a couple thousand knowledge and researched new buildables like the smelter, sawmill, and perhaps best of the bunch, an improved sail and deck gun. The sawmill and sail I learned required ethereal recipes as they were called, which could only be made at the loom, and I was sadly still missing many of the required ingredients. There was nothing left to do but head back out into the unknown in search of those materials, albeit aboard a much larger and hopefully sturdier ship. And action didn't waste time finding me as I encountered my first enemy shuttle. Although, despite its cannons, it didn't seem to be much of a threat, and I simply sailed right up to it and jumped on. Inside, there was some loot and a core to destroy. After whacking it a few times, it exploded and a 30-second countdown began. I fled the vessel and moved my ship a safe distance before enjoying the fireworks. It did leave a ton of wood for me to loot, but beyond that, the loot I received was disappointing. I'd later learned that other things on these boats could be destroyed for important resources, but I completely overlooked it at the time. Although while sailing away from the pirate vessel, I made a grave error while scanning my map, sailing right into a mine. Oh no. Both killing me and giving me my own 30-second countdown. In my panic, I couldn't figure out how to stop it and my ship self-destructed, respawning me back at where I started the game, which wasn't so bad considering it brought me back closer to the lighthouse. Before heading to my home dockyard, I wanted more cargo to make the trip worth it and head south finding a desert biome. Here, I finally found my first metal in copper. Like stone and lithium, it had to be mined, but gave both its raw ore and chunks that I loaded on my ship to be ground down later. Finding the copper unlocked my first armor set and new weapon for me to try, but I was still missing some of the ingredients for the armor. In fact, I never did find the bolts I needed, which I can only assume required iron. If you try the game, you'll have to let me know in the comments. I did want to smelt the copper, of course, and needed some stone, and safe to say, I think I got enough. The smelter, of course, did require fuel, and that means more lithium. You never have enough of it in this game. Before heading back, I gathered as much copper as I could, and I did encounter an iron node, but didn't have a tool strong enough to mine it. As I returned to Port Boreas, Lethe gave me my next mission to lure Mechanos out of his lair. But before that, I had upgrades to build. I started grinding my lithium and copper and researching for knowledge, and was able to gather all the resources I needed for the improved sail, which vastly improved my sail speed. Later, I added a thruster, which majorly increased my speed, but only for a short time, as unlike the sails, it did require fuel. In my short time with this game, I grew my ship from a tiny raft to a major yacht, and yet I only scratched the surface of the massive customization possibilities, not to mention further adventure and the hunting of the evil Mechanos, still to defeat. If you liked what you saw today from Echoes of Elysium, make sure you wishlist it today on Steam with my link in the video description or pinned comment, with its release date right around the corner coming on January 27th.